So Francesca, what is your recent preoccupation?
Many. But I've been focusing at the moment on ocean sound pollution, because as having been in my art practice, commissioning a lot of contemporary art music and electronic music, I worked together with an amazing Norwegian sound artist called Jana Vinderen, and went out on expeditions with her in order to collect sounds of the oceans. And we did some amazing recordings of humpback whales and coral reefs, healthy ones and dying ones. And I realized that the sound intensity in the water is so much more than in the air, and the sound travels so much further and is amplified. And I think about all of the anthropocenic sounds that we impose on the oceans, from deep sea mining, sonar from the navies, and all the nuclear detonations that happened in the atolls over the, in the beginning of the century. I'm aware of and of course the huge transport, shipping that we all order on our mobile phones. We order articles of clothing that come on from the other side of the world, and I don't think we realize the impact that these one-click buy has on our environment. So I'm campaigning at the moment to save the oceans from all the sound pollution. My proposition at the moment.
Olafur, what is your recent preoccupation?
Thank you, Maria. Well, first of all, I'm so excited to be in such good company. Thank you. Besides looking after what they are doing and sort of keeping track, which takes a lot of attention already of there, I've been interested in the benefits of leaving the comfort zone called the so-called art world and working either in the periphery or proposing sort of bridges from within to the outside of the art world. And obviously, as we heard yesterday, I've been inspired by the recent sort of philosophical strings based on interdependence, one could say, suggesting that a much more plural way of addressing the world seems to be a more successful one. I heard that someone interpreted I believe it was Latour who interpreted the Anthropocene into a few categories. One was the sort of, how do you say, the people who just deny it. It doesn't exist. The climate crisis doesn't exist. This is sort of the Trumps. The other ones are the opportunist who says, well, humankind always came up with the invention solving everything, and that is also, there's a lot of sort of neoliberal positivists who are there. And then there's, of course, the third one is the eco warriors who says, okay, I'm just going to go and live in the forest, never fly again, not eat meat, and then go back to the Stone Age. And of course we love them because they are amazing, but still maybe also not a forward solution. Could be debated. And then there's the fourth one, which is, as Latour suggests, a sort of a network and the idea of interdependence, or sort of a new way of seeing the world as a hyper object, as Timothy Morton would say. And we as artists, or we as passengers in the fuller sense, are in fact all responsible. We are all captains. Oh no, that's not what I say. We are all captains. We are not passengers, right? We are all steering the spaceship Earth. We are Earthlings, as Lovelock would say. And that's the fourth category. And of course there is now a fifth category, which is the dystopians who have just given up and say, okay, it's over, right? Let's just be negative and go home. So I'm very interested in this fourth group of seeing potential in sort of collaboration across sectors and cross fields. I'm very interested in what do I, as a sort of trained person from within the culture, say, what can I offer ecology? What can I offer the natural sciences? What can I offer the social sciences? And what can I take from all of these fields, which of course is not necessarily so new, but in that sense, right now I'm very preoccupied with just acknowledging that the artwork that I'm currently working on is the planet Earth.
Yeah, this is great. Yeah. I see No, the convergence of different disciplines is really, I think, key in what you are saying. And I mean, you chose, it's not Bruno Latour who chose for you. What you're saying is that even with knowledge, the knowledge of what is currently going on, to be waking up and active every day is really the key to not give up hope. But hope is a very big word. I think we should speak about what technically you really can do. And what you have been trying to do with Little Sun since years is really a very good example of how to take action and how to make things move forward without succumbing to the general, I don't say catastrophism, but yeah. So I would like you to maybe speak about Little Sun, if you can, now, and then we'll get back to Francesca.
Yes, of course. As some of you will know, I love to talk about Little Sun, so I am unstoppable. No, so essentially, as I said, the notion of taking what I learned from within art, and if we just for a second dive into that, what I think art is capable of is bringing our emotional narrative to something which has not yet been articulated, but it is still existing. Do you know there is that space between something which we feel exists, we might not even feel it, but there is a certain presence, and then a work of art can give that something structure, color, language, space. It opens up for an opportunity to recognize something, not just in the room in which you are, but also within yourself. You could say the artwork listens to what you want to say. So I'm very curious about this sort of, should we call it the psychology and the potential of that. And when I saw that there was 1 in 7 person in the planet did not have access to energy, and the use of energy was biomass, I mean cutting down trees and so on, and petroleum, fossil fuels essentially, kerosene. And of course this is what we call the off the power grid communities. For instance, in Ethiopia, about 80 million out of the 95 million people there are off the so-called electrical grid, and they, at this point, preferably are primarily using kerosene. So I thought, if I could collaborate with a solar scientist which knows about solar panels, if I could do a design with a rechargeable battery and an LED, I could also collaborate with an economist who would say, you need to be 10 times cheaper and over 3 years, more than 50 times beneficial for the economy. Otherwise, the economical upside will not compete with the oil and the petroleum, and so on and so forth. So collaborating with retail, solar scientists, economists, and also just what is called last mile specialists. How do one actually operate in the so-called last mile areas in the world, on the small islands out of Philippines, in the mountains, in the Himalayas, and in Pakistan, and in India, and Latin America, and all the places where there are large communities without access to energy. What I was hoping was simply also to give an emotional narrative to something which appears to be very abstract, to give pleasure and happiness to something which comes across as a highly pragmatic task, and take away the rationality, not completely because it also has to work, but to show there is actually something very beautiful about energy. And obviously the energy, and this is now where it starts to get a longer conversation, energy is essentially about education. It's about doing your homework, for instance, instead of sitting next to a kerosene lantern, which is perceived as being expensive for the parents, so you can't really sit. And if anybody's going to do homework, it's only the boy, because the girl is going to help first. By the time the boy is finished with the homework, the girl should be, it's too expensive to have her also. So there's all these different impacts. There is the specialists who are actually looking at this. They say it's a respiratory disease management instrument, right? Because it's actually what happens when you sit next to the kerosene. Then, of course, there is the opportunity to keep your little business open longer because the sun goes down and everybody packs their businesses up. So there's an economical side and so on and so forth. The big one is, of course, when 80 million people are burning kerosene, it has a massive impact in terms of burning what is called black kerosene, which is the most pollutive one, right? Let me just finalize this sort of little pep talk about Lillesund by saying, so we have just crossed the 1 million line, the 1 million delivered lantern a few months ago. And it's interesting if you think about it. So essentially, this one takes only about, I think it's 40, let's say, 40 milliliter of oil out a week for a family, which is almost nothing. It's like this much in an oil can, right? But if you take it over a year or the 5-year lifespan that this have, and then you plus this by a minus, that's the same amount of kerosene as we would fill up this whole exhibition with kerosene to the ceiling. Just to give you some indication of the sort of crowdfunding principle or the decentralization of operation, that it's not a centralized system, it is a messy, chaotic, unpredictable system. It is relying on a very fragile but very emotional sort of civic infrastructure rather than a big operator delivering energy. And there's something very human about this. There's this idea of maybe the power is at the periphery and not in the center. Maybe there's an opportunity in saying that the people themselves are the power generators, or the people themselves are the power, as we could say. And there is also a sort of economical principle in this, which is sort of distributing the economical muscle not to the central operator, because we are a social business, so to say, but the sort of economical efficiency is where the lights are and not where we are making them out of Berlin, out of Shenzhen, out of different places, right? So that's the philosophy a little bit. I will just put 2 lamps here and you can pass them on. And the one who actually, because 1 in 7 of you lives in off-grid communities, so the one who need it can take it, but otherwise just pass it on. Actually, Steffi, who sits here, was one of the very first people who presented it. And I should say that both Maja and Francesca have generously supported Lillesund.
Yeah, but Olafur, I was just one little question. It's about the material that you chose, I think. How many years ago?
So we designed it 2012. 2012.
And I think you know this plastic. Do you know where it's coming from?
Yes, so this is a relatively high quality recyclable plastic, but it is not all the fancy plastics that you are gonna talk to me about, like ocean recycled and all this. So it is true, this is a plastic. The lifespan of this lamp will take away from the ecosystem 5,000 grams of petroleum. Petroleum is also plastic. I mean, plastic is oil, right? And the plastic is 19 grams, and we obviously are still looking for how can we take the 19 gram out. And we're listening when you say that you might have something. But we also need to listen to the economist who says, if it's going to work in the last mile market, for instance, in Africa, it doesn't work if it is suddenly $2 or $3 or $4 more. So we're also waiting for the new sort of ecological plastics to come down in price. And I think it's fair to say that at this point, when I talk about economy, it is not a sustainable business. It is, to a large extent, a sort of a social or an NGO-driven, or it's a philanthropically driven. I mean, I talk about it in economical.
It is in any case one of the first artist-driven project that is looking out and watching out for the greater good, and which is something I always admired in what you do.
Thank you.
And same, Francesca, I was wondering, when you decided to go to the oceans, and because of your expertise in art, in contemporary art particularly, I think you thought also that it would be interesting to team up artists with researchers or explorers. Can you say something more about this? Like your latest collaboration, which we also participated in, I thought was particularly appealing.
Well, thanks, Maja. That's, of course, a question close to my heart. And I do feel that in this sort of tragic era that we live in, where we have all become aware of the fact that the oceans and our climate change are in a catastrophic state. We just read the report from the UN that 1 million species are disappearing, which then brings to me also how incredibly important your father's work was with the foundation here to protect this area for its biodiversity. And somebody told me something very moving, that when he passed away a few years ago, there were 200 people, indigenous people in costume, that came to pay their respects to him, no? Ils sont pas venus, les indigènes? Pour,
Quels indigènes?
no, the people whose livelihood were who came from other wet areas from around the world.
Il y avait des représentants de la Mauritanie, peut-être que c'est à cause du costume, mais
oui. Non, mais c'était des personnes indigènes qui venaient des pays où votre père avait voilà.
Oui, beaucoup de projets que mon père avait entrepris. Many of the projects are locally based in either in Africa or in Central Europe, in all the wetlands around the Mediterranean. And I guess what the people who came were all involved closely to these projects. And we were amazed to see how many came from all over the world at the time of this memorial.
Yes, thanks for... I mean, obviously, I'm only hearing things because I wasn't here, but so the one of the things we're really struggling with is also this very strong division between the way we perceive the land where we live and how we perceive the oceans, which we try to occupy as much as possible. And the volume of the oceans is 1,320,000,000 cubic kilometers of water, which is an enormous living space, and that represents 98% of all livable space on Earth. Whilst we, a dwindling population of wildlife and insects and our domesticated animals, we occupy only 2% of the remaining livable space on Earth, which is also shrinking. And those are NASA statistics. And if you think about from this crowded space where we live and how, and in the incredibly noisy, intensive urban landscape that we live in, how can we possibly comprehend something as vast and as the oceans? So it's hardly surprising that we all believe that these oceans have any amount of bounty, that we can fish anything and exploit as much of it as we want, and at the same time dump any amount of toxic waste into the ocean without any limits. We're beginning to understand that this is not possible, and in September we wait for the big boom when the oceans report comes out, which will probably be as terrifying as the species report. And what we're doing to our own planet through the oceans by just exploiting it the way we do, I think there's too much of a divide between land and ocean in our perception of it. So that's why the empathy that we need, and we all know we need to reconnect with the arts, with nature. We use the arts, and we don't use, but we invite the arts to be part of this discussion, because I think it's really more than awareness as well. And that's how we founded from TBA 21, which was the original foundation that I created in 2002, where over the years we did commission many artworks that dealt with the urgencies of today, whether they be social, political, or environmental, or dealing even with women's questions. I've always been drawn to commissioning projects that have a really sense of urgency in terms of the topics that we're addressing. And I always found the world of artists plentiful of people that wanted to engage, like Olafur, very, very engaged in numerous topics, actually, many different issues. And I think that the arts has this incredible freedom to transverse these different disciplines. So for me, it's not really art and science, but it is actually exploring the world we live in together with people from different disciplines, which include artists and scientists, as well as writers, filmmakers, anybody that can articulate this situation that we're in, including marine biologists, of course, whale researchers, and exposing them and us collectively at the same time on an expedition to these elements and bringing us all out of our comfort zones. You mentioned that, how important that is to come out of your comfort zone. And that in the end triggers a series of workshops and convenings that we do not lead to a work of art, but leads to a program, which is very much what you're doing here, which is so with the ateliers and so many different disciplines coming together in a sort of makerspace environment, really.
Well, thank you. In a certain form and in some sort, it is like going out of the museum walls and working in the world. And I think that that both of you, and probably me too, but I say probably, and for sure with the team here that we are building in Luma Arles, we are also following the same path. The Luma Foundation has started earlier than Luma Arles. I am trying to convey this to the more Arles people who are sitting here today. I don't know, I don't recognize many people, but we were existing and we still exist also outside of Arles, so we are not trying to just come and install the headquarters of our foundation here. Here is just our most ambitious project and the platform that can allow us to expand in ways that are new ways. I hope that we manage to convey this image to you, even more so if you were here yesterday or the day before, and if you are coming back, little by little, this image will be the description of really this archipelago we are trying to create here. I would like to ask if somebody has questions for Francesca or for Olafur. Or Maria, you have a question for the time being?
I have just one question for the three of you, which is responsibility and legacy. You know, Francesca, what do you think you're going to leave behind in the work you're doing?
Well, at the moment, I'm still trying to integrate what I'm trying to do into my father's legacy. And I think that's actually the real challenge that both Maya and I have, is that we have developed very individual languages and methods, which are very experimental and pioneering both. I mean, what's established here, what I've been experiencing in the last couple of days, is light years ahead of any other institution in the world. I'm sorry if I sound like over-flattering, but it is just light years ahead in terms of its method, in terms of its thinking and its generosity, but also the people that come here with a different attitude than they do when they go and give a talk somewhere else. Sorry, giving a talk here gives people a real chance to be very open and and the conversations, needless to say, that we've all had separately have completely changed my perception of my own practice. You know, and being able to come here and just to learn and experience things in this kind of very relaxed atmosphere, it just doesn't exist anywhere else in the world. So really, thank you for that opportunity.
Olafur, legacy, responsibility, it's the same?
Well, because my attention span this time was, what was the question again? The legacy. I'm not interested in legacy, but obviously I would like to leave behind less ignorance and fascism and arrogance and so on and so forth. But kind of goes without saying. But besides that, what was the first part of the question?
That was whether, you know, what do you think you'll leave behind?
No, it's not something I think about. Of course, I'm very interested in the application of, good ideas into the world, because we all have all these amazing ideas. All of you have amazing ideas. We all know it all. And the distance from knowing to doing is it appears to be so short, but obviously it's actually a lot longer than we think, right? So it's very interesting to show that that the difference between thinking about doing something and then doing something is in fact possible, but one actually does need to do it. You know, it's not like, because we often talk about and think about and we tell our friends about, and then it's almost like as if we already did it, because I told so many people about it now that I'm famous for doing it, but I still haven't done it, you know? And in that sense, this application from thinking to doing is very much what art is. It's the sort of transformative or convergence, or sort of, this is so interesting. And obviously just to finalize this, you know, after the Second World War in 1945, the UN, they made the Declaration of the Fundamental Human sort of Rights and Conditions, and this created a platform out of which a lot of doing happened. The UN did a lot, and legislative and rules, and you know, the EU to a large extent actually took a lot of that and so on. But it took a Second World War, and I wonder whether now the UN also needs to make, you know, the declaration of the rights of the plants, on biology and nature, or the rights for the animals, right? So right now I'm very curious about, is it possible to come up with this sort of systematic turning the thinking about the plants and the nature and, you know, the amazing things that we're talking about, but also then implement it into legislative, systematic applications, right? So this is what I would like to be a part of. Obviously, I'm not going to be the one doing it, but with small projects, artworks and little sons and so on, I'm contributing to a sort of a very big, messy movement. I feel I'm a part of a civic movement that has more agency than the governments has right now. So I'm very proud to not be in a government, but to be in the civic as such.
Thank you. Thank you, Olafur. Maria, shall we stop here or ask if there is a question? Vous avez, il n'y a pas de questions dans la salle? En français aussi? Oui, j'arrive.
Hello. It's both of you seem to have a very holistic vision, kind of a nature philosophic vision of the world. How would you bring a kind of a holistic vision into politics, into legislation? Because it seems that that's the blockage, that's the blocking point.
I think that there is an increasing attention on the potential of non-violent civic disobedience, for instance, right? There is the Extinction Rebellion, who's been so progressive and inspiring. And there is, I think, in that sense, we should not undermine that sometimes politics can be made from beneath. Of course, I'm being highly idealistic in suggesting this, but I mean, if we now think about trust, that I believe you will hear about this from Hadil at 4 o'clock in a much more inspiring way, but the notion of civic trust and interdependence, how should I say it? If we now look at the world, I'm proud to be a part of a cultural system, or a system which is called the cultural sector, and I don't mean to sound arrogant, but I do believe that the cultural sector as such enjoys civic trust. Not because it's particularly smart, but because it is everywhere. It has its feet on the ground. There's a poetry reading club down the street. There's culture in every country, in every culture, in everything. So there's a very interesting, non-centralized, messy system, and it employs a lot of people. It has a huge economy, part private, part public, part. It's a very interesting body. The public sector, which has lost its purpose, one could say, is sort of fumbling around. It's driven by populism, and it's being McKinsey-fied, and it is losing its civic trust. The financial sector really totally took away the relationship between the broader. Oh, this is getting too long. Anyway, public sector, no trust. Private sector, the sort of banking sector, financial sector, no trust also, right? This is the short version. Cultural sector is doing very good, and primarily because all the other sectors is doing so bad. So maybe this is the opportunity to turn our ideas into applications. And this is where, that's how one starts creating political systems. I think it's about collaborating, and collaborating for the time being is better than competing. And as we have learned so much from Maja and Francesca, and I somehow must admit, I see structural applications which goes into legislations further down the line. This is the work you're doing is going to eventually create grassroots movements, which is eventually going to create legislative systems, which are going to become the law in the future. I believe in this, optimistically. So,
as Hans Ulrich always says, the next questions will be during the coffee break. Thank you very much. Thank you very much.